Hey guys, I'm learning TFT and I'm sharing my learnings with you so that you can learn better and I can learn more effectively as well. In this video, I'm going to talk about encounter strategy. This was a viewer suggestion on the different strategies and win conditions for each encounter. I'm going to go through every encounter and talk about how the encounter should change your game plan in any specific game. Before I dive into that, I'm going to first go into the meta mindset of the day, how we learn. If you're new to my channel, this is a psychological, philosophical segment on how to help you get better at the game of TFT over the long haul, as well as should be beneficial for your life. So if you want to jump straight to the encounter strategy, take a look at the timestamp in the description below. All right, so how we learn. This is a book by Stanislas Dehaene, a French cognitive neuroscientist. And I'm just going through a new process where I am reviewing my book notes that I've highlighted and talk about how that applies to TFT and life in general. So Demis Hassabis, founder of the AI company DeepMind, said that intelligence can be viewed as a process that converts unstructured information into useful and actionable knowledge. So when you think about this in the context of TFT, unstructured information, especially at the beginning of a new set or a new patch, there's a lot of data that you're trying to consume. And the key thing is it is useful, converting it into useful and actionable knowledge. And a lot of times, if we are not having some form of deliberate process, it can be hard for the unstructured information to be useful and actionable. This is why when you see me watch a top challenger player during a coaching session, they're giving a talk, I'll pretty much take notes because that's a way of turning the unstructured information into useful and actionable, specifically actionable knowledge, where by writing it down, I am converting it into language and ideas that I understand better. So just translating the information that you are receiving into your own words makes it more useful and actionable for you. And then on top of that, by having the notes accessible, I can reference it, I can review it, which makes it more actionable in the future. Jean-Pierre Changot, I don't know how to pronounce French, said to learn is to eliminate. So part of this is when you do receive a lot of unstructured information, part of the challenge is how do you filter signal from noise? And given the amount of data, new information being created in the world, this idea is more important than ever. Is how do you eliminate the information that is irrelevant to what you need and what is useful? I've talked about this before of how intelligence of the future is about eliminating noise, right? It's about saying no to all of the social media, all of the irrelevant information, all of the tech companies that want to get your attention, that make it really hard emotionally to disconnect from whatever it is that you're engaging with. And so learning how to say no is arguably oftentimes more important than knowing how to say yes. So in the TFT context, there's so much information, so many comps that you could be learning. And so the key is being able to know which ones you should pay attention to and which ones you shouldn't. Attention, which amplifies the information we focus on. These are like kind of the key pillars of learning. So where you focus your attention, active engagement, an algorithm also called curiosity, which encourages our brain to ceaselessly test new hypotheses, error feedback, which compares our predictions with reality and corrects our models of the world, and consolidation, which renders what we have learned fully automated and involves sleep as a component. So when we apply this to TFT, it's like, okay, what do you pay attention to? Which content do you pay attention to? Are we looking more at casual YouTube videos? Are we looking more at in-depth analysis? Are we looking more at top challenger VODs? How engaged are you in the content? Or is it in the background, like while you're multitasking? Are you actively pausing during the video to consider test hypotheses, right, of what you would do in that situation, and then compare it to what the streamer actually does, compare as opposed to, are you just like kind of passively consuming it? Error feedback, comparing your prediction with reality and correcting that model. And if you're not forming hypotheses and then getting feedback on it, you're not really learning in that process. And then finally, consolidation, which really involves sleep. The best research says that sleeping something around 7 to 9 hours a night is optimal if you're trying to get maximal brain performance. Elaine said, everyone should learn to happily make errors. To think is to move from one error to the next. So if you are making errors, you get a bot 4, you get an 8. Instead of viewing that as a negative, you can view that as an investment and a positive if you are learning from it. Going back to the idea of error feedback, right? The only man who never makes a mistake is the man who never does anything, Teddy Roosevelt. So in TFT, this is a little bit less relevant, though it does apply to players who just one trick and play the same comp over and over again and aren't really experimenting, though every new patch, every new set, usually you're kind of forced to as the meta shifts. But the more that you lean into making mistakes and experimenting and making errors, the more opportunities you have to error correct and to learn. Stanislas says, learning occurs only if the brain selects the appropriate sensory inputs. Attention, use them to produce a prediction, active engagement, and evaluates the accuracy of the prediction, error feedback. So this is just summarizing the prior point that key things is focus, making a prediction, and then getting feedback and getting correcting your prediction. And so one of the challenges of today's world is we are trying to do multitask so much stuff. We are spamming games and not critically re-examining what occurred. And so if you are not focused on learning, if you are not predicting, and specifically even if you're playing games, because playing games is making a prediction, but if you are not going back and evaluating the accuracy of the prediction and using this feedback loop, then you're wasting all those gameplays, right? You are not actually learning to the optimal amount possible. This is also why VOD reviewing is so valuable. The psychologist Lisa Fagenson performed a series of experiments showing that whenever children perceive an event as impossible or improbable, learning is triggered. This is also why VOD reviewing other top players is valuable, because you are exposed to different lines that you would not normally consider, because your play style will usually lead you down one kind of path, right, of play, one style of play. And so when you VOD review other players, it can be useful to focus on games and maybe so probably skip games where the line is very familiar to you, where the decisions are very probable. You kind of have a high confidence that you know what's going to happen. Whereas if you are watching a game where you're like, hey, what's going on here? This just picked an augment that seems like it sucks. Or the player is choosing a line, making some decisions that's like, wait, what? This does not seem like it should work, right? That's where you are more likely to learn than not. Numerous studies confirm that stress and anxiety can dramatically hinder the ability to learn. And your stress and anxiety goes up when you are sleep deprived, so that's another reason sleep is important. But in the situation that you're playing in tournaments, or you're playing for a promotion for like the highest LP you've ever reached, or you're trying to play for a snapshot, that can really harm your ability to learn. And so learning kind of emotional regulation strategies like mindfulness practice, deep breathing, exercise, eating well, these can all help you improve your learning process, so that, like, by understanding that your body influences your brain and your ability to learn, the more effectively you can kind kind of create an environment for your brain to perform optimally. To get information into long-term memory, it is essential to study the material, then test yourself rather than spend all your time studying. So I think for most people in TFT, most people probably play too much and study not enough. And so you can kind of consider playing as the testing. But the inverse can also be true. If you're studying all the time and not playing, you are not really practicing retrieving the information that you're studying, which is actually critical to the learning process as well. Which is why when I've talked to a lot of top challenger players, like Deepe in my recent talk, Rhea, a lot of the top challenger players say the optimal balance is around 50-50, where you're spending half of your time on TFT studying, half your time playing. And I think most of them also argue that they probably skew too much towards the playing side, but the top players who we consistently see in the rankings who have high LP but the fewest gameplay, they are definitely spending a lot more time studying than playing. Experiments show that you can multiply your memory by a factor of 3 when you review at regular intervals rather than trying to learn everything at once. The rule is simple and all musicians know it. 15 minutes of work every day of the week is better than 2 hours on a single day per week. So if your goal is to consume information and to really learn it, the idea here is that instead of spending, just cramming it all in one day, that's less effective than spending a little bit of time every day. And related to this is like they talk about research on the way colleges and universities and high school testing is set up, that actually prevents you from learning and retaining that information long term because it promotes cramming, right? What's more important is actually to have a consistent process that you are doing at smaller intervals rather than inconsistent processes that you are doing in large chunks. The latter is going to be less effective for your learning process. All right, so with that said, let's jump into the encounter strategy. So at the macro high level, you really want to prioritize what you don't get from the encounter. This is similar to kind of like multiplicative benefit of items. If you think about like if you're playing Vanguard Marksman, you already have a lot of AD, so you want to have more attack speed, you want to have more damage amp, right? You want to have the thing that you don't already have. And the same is true for encounters. If you already get a lot of gold, then when you are selecting your augments, you want to prioritize more items or combat. If you already have a lot of items, then you want to prioritize more gold in combat. So that's like kind of the high level, but I'm going to go into specific strategy on each. So component anvils here. Dish Soap talked about this a lot in his Worlds run last set, where he won Worlds. And specifically, one of his big advantages that he found performed really well for him was on component anvils playing reroll. The reason for that is because reroll benefits a lot from having more items, because oftentimes you will be trying to 3-star 2, maybe 3 units, and you want to have them all fully itemized. On top of that, the most recent patch had a system change where they decreased the average number of item components you get per game by 1 full item, if not slightly more. And so Dish Soap's argument is that by stage 3, specifically 3-2, if you're playing 1-cost or 2-cost reroll, you want to have your main carry and main tank both 2-starred, and at least one of them have 3 items, usually your carry. You want to have 3 items by that point. And that can be challenging to do if you don't have excess items. And even if you do have more items, you might not have the right items, right? Because for reroll, it's far more important because your gold is concentrated in fewer units. It is more important to magnify the strength of those units with BIS items. Whereas if you have a larger team where the power distribution of your team is more spread out, then you can afford to have a little bit less BIS items for that reason, and because you might be leveraging the trait more. Like let's say you're playing 7 Street Demon, your team gets a lot of benefit from the trait, or 4 Marksman, right? You get a lot of AD, and so even a 2-star Jin or 2-star Jinx naked can do a good amount of work with no items. Whereas if you're playing, let's say, Rengar reroll, 3-star Rengar, and Rengar is pretty much like the main power on your entire team, you really need to make sure that Rengar has BIS items in order to 1v9 the opposing team. And that's why Dish Soap argues that for component anvils, you really want angle towards reroll, which means also that he prios gold specifically to be able to hit those 3-star units. Golden Gala is all gold augments. Keep in mind, know what hero augments are strong. Right now for patch 14.4, Poppy is really strong, especially if you have gloves, because JG Hodge Hodge is BIS. So if you have Rod Glove tier and it's Golden Gala, I would prioritize Poppy, holding Poppies. Also right now, because Morgana Bastion rerolls rolling is, popular, holding that is good anyway. But knowing kind of the augment tiers, so like pulling up like Meta TFT and going to their augments page, you can like go to gold and see what are the like kind of consistent strategies, right? Right now 10,000 IQ going into Strat Amp is good. So if you happen to have a LeBlanc and Echo drop with like a tier rod, then you might be more willing to hold the Echo than if you don't have a tier rod and it's not this encounter. You'd probably be more willing to sell the Echo for just holding other one costs. So that's just an example where, depending on the patch and the augment strengths, like that can affect what units you hold in stage 1. Scuttle Puddle has higher tempo, more resources, which gives you the possible opportunity of going fast 9 if you are tempoing with it, or if you get. So in most cases, you want to avoid a gold econ augment on 2-1 in a gold encounter. But there may be rare cases if a fast 9 build is broken, like if playing Urgot fast 9 or Strat Amp fast 9 or Divinicore Zed fast 9 is very strong, then you could consider taking basically econ augment 2-1, and you consider the encounter as like basically another econ augment. So you have double econ, and that you could consider a fast 9 strategy. You could consider 3-cost reroll, because 3-cost reroll is usually quite hard to hit, since you typically want to have econ augment, but the encounter itself could replace that for you. Keep in mind that on these portals, the whole lobby will usually have a higher cap, so you usually want to avoid low cap boards like 1-cost reroll, or boards that, let's say like Exotech Zeri MF, where it's solid on lower resource situations because it benefits from the Exotech items. But when everyone has a lot of gold and can cap out higher, then the boards that are good at level 8 with fewer resources, but then start to lose to level 9 boards, those boards are usually less optimal to angle towards. Scuttle Puddle and gold encounters are also generally quite good with investment strategy, since you have more gold to buff your units. And more in general, I talked about this earlier, if you have more gold, you want to prioritize more items on 2-1, and then you can prioritize combat later and kind of skip your econ augment in that case. Prismatic Prelude and Prismatic Finale, but more so Prelude, leads to higher tempo and higher caps, so similar to this. One thing also with higher tempo, higher capped lobbies is these are worse for Cypher, since you will likely take more damage. Like let's say someone takes some combat augment like Build-A-Bud, right, on 2-1. Against boards like that, you are going to take a lot more damage throughout the game, stage 2 and stage 3, than you might otherwise like be able to kill more units with Cypher. And so you're going to be a lot low HP. Also, because the lobby will likely have higher caps, even if you cash out a normal Cypher amount, because everyone else has more resources, your incremental benefit from cashing out more resources from Cypher decreases. So in general, Cypher is better on low resource, low tempo portals. I'm gonna mention that here. Cypher better on low resource, low tempo portals, worse on high resource, high tempo portals. Both because you lose more HP in early game and your cash out benefit is less valuable in higher resource games as a percentage of your resource pool. All right, Prismatic Finale, delayed power if start with silver. So in this case, if you know that it's going to be Prismatic Finale, you could angle more Lost Streak. Silver 2-1 makes Lost Streak more viable since you know that you can cap out late with like a Prismatic Combat, for example, later. So you don't want to burn all your resources early as much. I mean, you can if you can win streak, but makes early Lost Streak a little bit more viable. Whereas early Lost Streak will take more damage here. Trainer Golems, higher likelihood of prismatic traits. Anima, Street Demon, Syndicate. So you want to really preserve HP if you're not playing for that. If you are playing for that, you might want to greed it. So part of greeding it means if you can play for prismatic trait, consider Lost Streak into Carousel for possibility of spat. Also greeting Wandering Trainer or rolling for like a crown, a crest or crown, since that could just win you the game on the spot. You are more likely, like let's say you've rolled 2 of your options and you have a third option that you like the most, but if that option is only slightly worse or slightly better than maybe your second option, I would consider rolling the one that you would pick for the upside of hitting your like a Wandering Trainer or like a crest or crown. Gold sub, similar to Scuttle, more gold prioritized 2 items on 2-1. Loot sub, know the table. So kind of similar to Trainer Golems. Wandering Trainer goes up in value because you can play for a Prismatic trait. Playing 7 Syndicate is also viable. Like 10 Anima and 10 Street Demons still a little bit harder on here because you need to get to level 10 if you get multiple spats, unless you have a Wandering Trainer with it. But consider playing around artifact lines. Like you could keep Fiddle as a line open, knowing what the spats are. Other tip here is that before you pick your augment, you can scout to see what the loot is when someone else has picked their augment. So that might, like let's say you don't pick your augment yet and someone else picks their augment and you find out that's an artifact anvil, then if one of your options is another artifact anvil, you could get like a double artifact like Rengar or Nefiri or something, or like a double artifact Fiddle. And so that information could affect what augment you select. Prismatic Party, high tempo, high cap, all prismatic. Cypher, tougher to play. You likely want to preserve HP because the lobby tempo is so high, you're going to take a lot of damage. You're less likely to want to play for win out in this case, unless you have the highest potential cap in the lobby. Artifact Anvil, you want to hold the artifact line, so you're more likely to hold Shaco, Fury, and the surrounding board, Fiddle, etc. Usually, a lot of players would recommend, top challenger players typically pop the anvil on 1-4 so that you can use the artifact to determine augment direction. Ideally, you pick it after you get your components to see what your components and your artifact options are available to you. But I've done that, and it's like the timing is very hard to do it quickly. So it really depends on what your comfort level with the artifacts and decision making speed. But in general, you don't actually, you can pop the anvil on 1-4, but not make the decision until later, because it can go into 2-1 and it won't show you the augments until after you make the artifact decision. So just keep that in mind. Crab similar to Scuttle. I think Leduc has done some analysis on what comps kind of can survive Crab better. I typically don't have that really influence my strategy, but if you want to get more detail, you can look at Leduc's stuff there. Treasure Armory. Similar to like Loot Sub, you can prioritize emblem lines, because if you get like a Wandering Trainer, and I've made a video about this in the past with like a Anima or Street Demon, you can force 10 Anima or 10 Street Demon, especially if you have a Reforger. I think it takes like something like average of 15 golden rolls to get at least one that has a spat or pan, and you want to keep the component of whatever it is. Like Anima, you want to keep Tier open. Street Demon, you want to keep Rod open. And make sure you have enough gold to roll for it. Golem Armory, I haven't played this enough, especially with the new change, to really have a strategy around this. If you have additional thoughts, I would love to hear it. Pot of Gold, similar to Gold Sub, just a little delayed. Upgraded Start. If you have a weaker 2 cost, or you don't have slammable items that you can place on your 2 cost, I would consider selling for Econ and Lost Streaking, because the players in the lobby that are strong are likely going to win streak, and you're just going to be at a disadvantage, or you win/lost streak. Yeah, this, I don't really like this encounter, because it just gives a huge advantage to players who high roll their 2 cost. Reroll Sub. This is like kind of the inverse of Vi encounter of the anvils. Like, you want to likely lean towards reroll, but you are likely going to be missing items, so you really want to prioritize items on the augment selection. To split or not to split, similar to Gold Sub. Game theory here is if you're ahead or contested, then you're more likely to want to split, because it prevents someone from catching up to you who is in maybe a worse spot. But let's say they're the only one to split and they get a huge cash out, then they might be able to catch up to you in that situation. Or if you're contested, I've had a situation where I was beating someone. I was in a much better spot than someone who was contesting me, and I decided to not split. He got the split cash out. He was the only one, and then he used all that gold to leapfrog ahead of me, right? So if you're contested, you're more likely to split. Also, I've had situations where I was like 100 streaking, I think at stage after carousel on stage 3, and then I decided to split. And because everyone else was in a worse spot and they wanted insurance to not split, I was the only one that got the cash out, and that just further amplified my lead and I think gave me an easy top 2. So definitely keep that in mind as the game theory for your split or not split decision. And kind of related to that is, if you are near the top and you don't want someone that has, or you have like a pretty high cap and you don't want someone else who's near you in cap potential to get a large lead on you, then you might want to split as well. Extra augment or accelerated augments, you want to practice tactical anticipation like I've discussed in my previous video. You may be able to stack synergistic augments if you have 2+ augments in stage 2. So thinking about like, what's an example of this? Like 2 econ augments, or I'm sure there's plenty of examples I just can't think of off the top of my head right now. But like planning ahead and thinking in advance, like what category of augment do I want for my second stage 2 augment, right? Do I want more econ? Do I want more items? Do I want combat right now? Planning that ahead in your mind can help you be more prepared. Hacked Egg incentivizes you to preserve HP to be safer to take 9 egg or even 13 egg. And in this case, the safest way to preserve HP is to lean towards reroll, since you can usually stabilize in stage 3, and also reroll will be able to take advantage of more resources, whether that's items or artifacts. So that might make you lean more towards reroll direction. Later, Extra Augment can cause you to maybe consider taking gold more on 2-1, since you can make up the items and combat value later. Lucky Shops gold is less value, so prioritize items in combat. And 2-star shops makes rerolls more valuable, so like Starry Night, for example, or Prismatic Ticket. But gold in general becomes less valuable because your opponents are more likely to hit their units earlier. So getting items and combat is going to be more important, especially items, because with 2-star shops, especially if this is like on a gold sub encounter, everyone's going to be able to get to level 8. A lot of people are going to be able to get to level 9 and then hit a bunch of 2-star 4 costs, 2-star 5 costs. And most of the time, you're not going to have items to be able to place on those units. So having extra items on this encounter can be extremely valuable. All right, so that covers overall encounter strategy for set 14. Would love to hear your thoughts, comments, questions in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.